Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to one of our for the new year, our China and the World Center seminar series. Let me start by acknowledging and celebrating the first Australians on whose traditional unceded lands that we meet on today, that we learn on, that we work on, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I am Beverly Look. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of International Relations at the Cardwell School of Asia Pacific Affairs, housed within the College of Asia and Pacific. A very happy Lunar New Year to everyone that is celebrating it, and a very warm welcome back to another year of, as I mentioned, the ANU China Seminar Series. We've got a really exciting program lined up for you this year. So for those of you who haven't yet signed up to our mailing list, please do, and please also look at our events page on our CIW webpage. So I have great pleasure today to welcome Professor Ming-sho Ho, who will be kicking us off for the year. Professor Ho will be speaking on his latest book, published by Temple University Press last May 2025, entitled Be Water, Collective Improvisation in Hong Kong's Anti-Extradition Protests. And today's topic will be on that book. So very briefly, let me introduce Professor Ho. Professor Ho is a professor in the Department of Sociology at National Taiwan University. His research focuses on social movements, labor sociology, and environmental issues. His published works include multiple, but include Challenging Beijing's Mandate of Heaven, Taiwan's Sunflower Movement, and Hong Kong's Umbrella Movement, as well as Working Class Formation in Taiwan, Fractured Solidarity in State-Owned Enterprises. And currently, Professor Ho is working on a monograph analyzing how the alliance of social movements and political parties results in varying reforms. So great pleasure to have you here with us, Professor Ho. We'll speak for about maybe 45 to 50 minutes. We've got a really good audience joining us online as well, so hopefully we'll have a really good stimulating discussion, which I will moderate. So for those of you who are joining us online, please do type in your questions in the chat and I will read them out during the Q&A. Great. Without further ado, Professor Ho.
Thank you very much, Beverly. It's really been a pleasure and my honor to be a visiting scholar here in CIW. And I really learned a lot and enjoy your accompanyship for the past months. And unfortunately, my visit will be ended today. So I'm leaving for next week because next week will be starting semester for my university. So I really enjoy the time I've been spending here. So my book, today will be my book. So it's about a Hong Kong podcast that I published last week, and no, last month. So the name is, the title is Be Water. Yeah, this is how the cover design looks like. And also this is a table of contents. So I'll try to develop an actionist sociology perspective out of that. So I'll be sharing with my research for the next 45 minutes or under. So I'm hoping that, thank you all for coming here, both those who are present or those who are online. It's really make me happy to share with my research. So this is how it look like. So before we go into the book detail, let me talk about a brief update about what happened in Hong Kong right now. We all know that in 2019, early 19, there was a bill being introduced in Hong Kong that will legalize extradition to mainland court, and that move really caused a lot of political controversy. So this bill was building on early on, and the protest really erupted in the summer of 2019 and went on for more than a year. And we all know that in mid-2020, that Beijing just imposed a national security law. So right now, I would characterize Hong Kong as a police state. And during the process, I'm going to describe that. But there is a protest campaign that lasted for weeks. And originally it was peaceful, but it moved on to more militant one, even to violent ones. at its first year anniversary, there was more than 11,000 arrestees and more than 1,800 being persecuted, and more than 1,000 being persecuted. That's only the counting for the year one. And right now, according to the diaspora Hong Kong organization, there are actually close to 2,000 political prisoners who have been in jail for political reasons. As well as protests throughout that year, many deaths. Some suicide deaths by the protest governmental initiative. There are a number of suspicious deaths that can be accounted for. So, and the protests really had the misfortune to encounter COVID that was emerging in January 2020. So people really are scared of getting out and getting close. So with the national security law being imposed in 2020, I think this is really de facto end of one country system. For Hong Kong, even though the law was imposed in the name of improving one country system, but we know that the result was the opposite. Hong Kong right now does not have any opposition party or lawmaker, opposition or lawmakers. So it's like the political landscape has been sanitized. A limited press freedom and all the civil society organizations, whether it's an NGO, whether it's a student organization, or it's like labor union, active labor union have been eradicated. So we see a massive extinction of civil society organization in Hong Kong. And for political leaders that have some fans or followers, most of them are either in exile or in jail. So it really makes me I really feel it very unusual for more than 1.5 years that the Hong Kong spanned as a British colony. It used to be a gathering place for worldwide revolution. Like Dr. Sun Yat-sen, who is the founder of the Republic of China, as well as Ho Chi Minh, as well as Dr. Thomas Liao, who actually was a leading founder of Taiwan independence movement, has his organization founded in Hong Kong in 1938. But right now, Hong Kong under China's rule has become a place that produces its outward refugees. So this really marked a great change. So my research question is that how do we make sense of this great upheaval? So Hong Kong, the stereotypical impression of Hong Kong is that it being a super competitive volcano city that has its special capacity in expediting everything, including goods, money, and people. So people are not encouraged to lose in that city. But during the project, so we see the Hong Kongers that really show their less familiar face. So how do we make this unexpected mass insurgencies? I'm coming from a sociological background, so we do have a lot of theory explaining the rise of social violence. And most of the time we rely on structuralist tropes. Two of the most commonly seen concepts are resources. Let's say in the resource mobilizations, that we expect movement to really pick up when they have enough of resources. And resources can be everything, money, people, but we know the movement really result of this resource. The second school look at opportunities, which is referred to the opening the political system. So we expect that when, like, for example, there was a invite within the ruling bloc, that might create an opportunity for challenger to mount their action. So opportunity is the second important concept. But with that, we often come into a very static understanding of social violence. We often overlook the situation when protests emerge in the least expected conditions. So there is an element that has not been accounted for by these agents. So I'm hoping that with this book, I can really highlight foreground the power of agency, because right at the moment when the Hong Kong government tried to introduce an amendment for the refugee tradition, So the situation looks like as if that the Hong Kong government can done it easily because the position was in disarray and there was minimum of protest from civil society. But unexpectedly, it ended up to be a transformative protest that forever rewritten the city's history. So no one see it coming. So I think we being in the social science, we really should be more open for these changes. And secondly, I think it's also in the trend of many global protests that like in the past we imagine social movement to be like a leadership center, that the protests have been mobilized by certain organizations. But right now, increasingly we see different parts of the world. We have the April Revolution in China, or even the Iranian protests in the past weeks. So all these protests does not go with a leader, with a figurehead. And many others, it appears that this protest has emerged spontaneously. So how do we explain this decentralized protest? I think that's a number to test for me. I think we have a number of explanations, but I don't think they are that sufficient. One particular strand of them is to look at how internet has restructured the protest. So as if that with the digital media, so the organization that with members no longer important. And the point is that we should get connected rather than organized. So a lot of theory built on that. But for me, I think the single-minded focus on digital media is kind of misplaced. It is there. Hong Kongers do use a lot of innovative use of social media, but that's not everything. So with that, I try to develop new concepts, try to account for what happened in Hong Kong. And my answer is that I try to fall back on one of the streams of in sociology, what I call actionist sociology. It was the idea that first promoted by a French sociologist, the idea that historicity, which is of course very philosophical, but the kernel of the idea is very simple, is that we should foreground and trace the source of social change back to the agency themselves. Because sometimes society changes because people have different ideas and the people were willing to take different steps as a result of the way that we found in the society different. So also try to use James Shakespeare's idea that we should conceptualize agency as art for creativity. So that's why I use the concept improvisation in my book. So improvisation basically is accomplished capacity. We as a fully socialized being, we all have this kind of capacity. Improvisation means that we can always respond to newer situations. We can always create sentences that we never spoken before, yet they make perfect grammatical sense. So that's the capacity of improvisation. So what I call collective improvisation here is that when there was a certain sense of urgency, why is just descent? And many people, a sufficient number of people, try to try this mechanism, try to use this strategy. So collective improvisation is what, according to my definition, is peer-produced strategic response without prior coordination. So just people that do what they thought they should do. And the collective result was like, it was coordinated, it was like orchestrated. But yet the collective result is so impressive. But for this mechanism to be activated, I think we need a lot of conditions for that, because this type of campaign does not happen on everyday basis. So we need like sufficient support. We all know that pro-democracy movement has widely enjoyed support in the city of Hong Kong. And the city of Hong Kong would be quite an anomaly that the city has attained such higher level of income, yet the city itself is not democratized. So it's really the opposite of what we saw in many contemporary anti-authoritarian protests. Most of them happen in developing countries. People are poor, people are deprived of livelihood. Yet Hong Kong is a high-income city. Yeah. And also we need transform agency. The people are willing to adopt new way of action that violating what their previous understanding. And also they are learn the lesson from the previous engagement and so on, and do this in a strong emotional status. All these it takes all these two chemistry to produce a result. So I'm trying to use this term because there have been an argument whether that party was leaderless, meaning that there was the absence of a centralized vision, or leaderful, which is a new term, of course, but basically imply everyone's leader. Well, I think this is sort of semantic. So I want to emphasize that even many people participate in the project, but people bring with a different skill set, resources. So it's not that everyone was equally capable. I think this is kind of fantasy, which I try to resist. And also, I think organizations such as labor union, advocacy group, in Hong Kong, like human rights organization, they are still important, but they also improvise as the situation unfolds. So this is actually the example that I give out on the opening chapter. This is one episode in that long process. So it happens on August 31st, 2019. So the event was called Hong Kong Way. So it was like a human chain rally. It's unlike usual rally that usually gather in place. It is spread out, it's linear. We try to connect many people throughout the street in Hong Kong, try to demonstrate that they were peaceful, and also most important, because of this human chain rally, it's a more sort of established repertoire in the West. So this event is really geared toward international media to highlight that Hong Kongers were peaceful. So they were obeying the order. They occupy the city. They didn't disrupt the traffic. So when you need people to in their hand to cross the street, they will yield way when the traffic light turns red, to give way to the vehicle traffic. So this is how they work. So it lasts for just 1 hour in that event, and it creates a lot of photogenic photos throughout the media. So it's a good sort of PR campaign for me. So my question is, who invented that? Who organized that? Who is the initiator that encouraging more than 200,000 people to took out the street and do the same thing, following the instruction? The answer is we cannot find organizer. So the story for this is that several people have been circulating this idea prior to that, because they think that evolving situation in August had took a violent turn, and they try to calm down the situation. So few people who has European experience, because they knew that this is more like a common thing repertoire in Europe. So they actually introduced that in Hong Kong. And they happened to find that August 31st would be the 30th anniversary of Baltic Way, which was a time when the Baltic country was fighting for their autonomy when the Soviet Union was there. So they tried to frame it up as a 30 years anniversary of that memorable event. And also, I think the situation looked pretty much similar, right? Baltic state was resisting Moscow's pressure. At the same time, Hong Kong was trying to insert in their autonomy vis-a-vis Beijing, right? So the analogy could not be perfect. So people were circulating that, and until just a few days ago, an online announcement was announced in the social media. And then people just began to organize a regional coordination group on social media, because they need coordinated on the ground, because they want to spread out the people. So they don't want the people just gathering outside the metro station, because they are gapped in between. So they want to spread out people to make the spectacle really went on as planned. And then so the joint result was that. So again, so it was a good, of course, it was a good move. It was a strong and powerful statement that Hong Kong really want democracy, autonomy with peaceful means. But again, there is no centralized autonomy. We cannot even find the people who bear responsibility for that. So, and this episode, I think, it captured many projects making to our projects, because we cannot find them. So how do Hong Kong do this? I think the number one condition is that there need to be a reform and change agency, because the Hong Kongers use this term Hong Kong Big to describe people who are very apathetic, who are not concerned about politics, who are just concerned about consumption, everyday life, and so on. And also in the past, Hong Kong pro-democracy is noted for of pursuing a peaceful, rational, and non-violent manner. But when this protest emerged, you see the expansion of toleration, that some violence were tolerated. And violence, of course, came into two kinds. There are violence against property, which means destruction, vandalism. People do that to like metro station, to like pro-government, for China stores. And also there are violence against people. They try to harm people like who are like police person and also who are like pro-government people. So this violence happened. But you see increasingly during the process, people extend their tolerance. And I think also what happened around 5 years ago, the so-called umbrella movement is also an important catalyst for that. The umbrella movement was like a street occupation for more than 2 months, with the demand of genuine democratic election of chief executive. So it was a street occupation. Many ideas were circulating, incubating in that zone, yet they don't have the opportunity or capacity to implement that. So this idea, like this really being an incubator of novel ideas. One of the ideas was that yellow economic zone, which means that we should build a solidarity economy, not just political consumption to punish your enemy, reward your friend, but it's into it was a like solidarity model that we should build a self-reliant, self-sufficient economy for Hong Kongers, for those Hong Kongers who are really pro-democracies. And that idea actually you saw that dating back in 2014, because in the monograph occupation, because the occupation happened in a busy commercial district, and many mom and pop stores were negatively affected. So you see a lot of action initiated by the netizens that we should patronize these stores, so to restore their livelihood, so that they could like show their support for us. So the idea was implemented there, and also the other idea was Nano Walls. Nano Wall in 2014 was just a segment of staircase, happened to be located in Central, which is the epicenter of occupation. But during the 2019 and 2020, you see Nano Wall, which basically means that a wall that on which you can post anything, like posted paper, poster, and that developing in many street corners, many community. And this Nano Wall become like a community center of mobilization. People really take ship to man this station and to update the content and information, become a community bulletin board, it become a community writing board. So this idea was seminal in 2014, and we see the flourishing of it when Hong Kong had a second chance. And of course, there was a lot of deaths, even right in the beginning. So the first death of Marco Leung, who killed himself in the central, which is the epicenter of the protest, and so that really is a major event. So this shows how many waves of mourning activity that happened. So this is the mourning activity. So the movement actually was proceeding in a very sorrowful mood, because you heard death from time to time. And every time when there were people death, there were mourning activities like that. And also from my interview, I think many participants joined the protest in a highly emotional status. I think one of the typical emotion response I found is guilt. Guilt for many reasons. For example, from a retired banker, she came to Taipei very often. So many times I met her in Taipei. She came to Taipei to secure some supplies like helmet and so on, mask for protesters. And later on, when the protesters had to flee, she even accompanied them to Taipei and secure accommodation for them, secure a livelihood for them. So I asked them the question that's very simple. I asked her, why do you do so much for these protesters? So that's her answer. So I was too simple, or simply too lazy and too stupid in the past. We did nothing except make money. That's why I have a sense of guilt. So you see the protesters, many of them were young people, were willing to risk their life in conflict. So this kind of strong emotional state that they feel that they as elder who is established and she is retired in a highly lucrative line of business. So she was willing to do that. And then from the other interviewee, who is a young protester, a student protester. So he also blamed himself, like this might seem minor because she just reflect the moment when the police just rushed forward. And his first instinct was to run away. Whether many of his friends were in that stay in that scene and try to create disturbances for the police advance. And so he began to blame himself that he cannot do more for the police. So that's from his word. I did not have the courage to keep fighting. My first reaction was to flee from the scene for self-preservation rather than have those who stood by my side. So this sense was quite prevalent, and as we all know that every time when we feel guilty, the next reaction will be we try to overcompensate. So you see that a lot of donation, especially resource donation, came from this ill-feel middle class Hong Kongers who try to give away whatever they want, they have. And also, although the authority and like many government also try to characterize this project as was a mob action, they were disorganized, there's a violent people there. Well, I think you look closer, there are micro foundations for this prolonged militancy. So there are networks there, and this network had to build on personal trust and connection. It does not just emerge out of nowhere. It's not just because of people are violent by temperament, or it's just people are angry. Actually, there are sophisticated networking there. So number one source of the network is a team, a 小队. Because people, when they try to confront the police, they often organize a team, and these teams are made up of people who were acquaintances already. Like they were friends, they were classmates, they were co-workers. So they often join the fight with sufficient coordination. And they don't like to collaborate with other people during the confusing engagement with the policemen because it was found that they was like infiltrator or spy in the scene. So they try to coordinate with the people. And there's another nexus that's a protester with a supporter. And I think Hong Kong really devised an interesting name. This supporter were called parents, in the sense that parents supporting their kids. So they were called parents. Because many protesters, they were young, they were eventually evicted from their native family, they have no place to go. And also they need to spend a lot of money to buy this equipment, helmet, and so on. So these become the donors. And some of them just contribute more than material resources. Some of them take in borders, but they have no place to go. Some will even fly with them when they have to force leave Hong Kong. So I think the parents really, this kind of analogy, this kind of name really spoke a lot because some of them really even evolve into quasi-family relationship. As they were real parents, they were real children. The parents have the obligation to take care of the children. So they do a lot of things. And all this happened among in the interpersonal relationship. And of course, there was another cyberspace that was set up for maintaining and sustaining these projects. Telegram was one of them. If you look at Telegram there, it was like an underground city, like catering for many needs in the movement. Like people who need medical care, because protesters, if they were injured, were afraid to go into the hospital because they know the emergency. In the hospital emergency, policemen be there. And also like this another interesting so-called school pickup, because many protest engagement happened in the late evening. So at that time, the Hong Kongers might not have access to public transportation. So many private vehicle owners will coordinate the action. They drive up to the protest scene and they try to retreat these protesters away from the danger zone. So basically to enable the escape from that. So this so-called school pickup, again, making an analogy of the parent and children relationship. So a lot of online and offline coordinations happen layer, and that was the micro foundation of sustained projects. And also, I also do a project event analysis, you know, which have in the social movement study, which have become quite conventional. So my sources came from two newspapers and news sites. All these are pro-democracy. So over a span of 71 weeks, I gathered 1,770 projects. So most of them, 65% are peaceful. 28% are disruptive. This means that they were creating disturbance to the order without using the violence. For example, a strike, blockading the road, and also like blockading the airport, which I think is a very inventive repertoire invented by Hong Kong at that time. They do it several times, and some really disrupt the government, and also they are violent way. So, and so I have more than 1,700 projects event. And with that event, I do a further analysis. I look at the action that were described in this event. So I have a table of classification for 133 activities there. So what people do there, maybe singing a song, they might chanting a slogan, or they might like unfurl a banner. All these are activities. So most activities like hitting the road, singing songs, and marchings. And so this is a protest arranged by weeks. So you see actually there are peaks over there. This really, I use a week as an analytical unit because during that protest, you see that oftentimes in weekend, there are more large scale gathering, more violent confrontation. But during the week time, every day, people still make some protests, but it's in more smaller scale. So every time you see actually many peaks, and these peaks are often triggered by threat. Like for example, you know that July 21st Vietnam incident where mobsters were found to attack protesters with police support. So that really raised doubt about the integrity of Hong Kong's law enforcing people. So that really a scandal that came into a peak. And this is a table that I try to tabulate three kinds of protests. So you see actually stepwise radicalization. It was first peaceful, then disruptive and violent. And for a process, you see diffusion in two terms, in either in the organizers or in space. So this table shows the green one represents the protest that has no organizers. So many of these events were just announced on the internet, and people just do what people propose on the internet. So you cannot pinpoint an organizer as post for that. So originally it was not many because most starting in February, March, April, May, or most of the events were organized by like NGOs, events, and so on. But when the movement really flared up, you saw the sharp rise of these projects with organizers. And secondly, I want to look at the space. These are the three spaces that witnessed the three occupations during the umbrella movement. So these are Mongkok here, and these are central, these are one side. But Hong Kong have 18 districts. So these three areas can be considered a center or what I call conventional area where people make a progress. So what the Hong Kong did during the period was that they tried to decentralize the project. It made many technical sense. First of all, most of the people live in the new territory suburb area. So it makes it easier for people to attend the project that is taking place in not distant from where they live. Otherwise, they need to take 1 hour train to a center and make another 1 hour turn back home. And secondly, it tried to exhaust the police deployment. So it also makes that sense. So these are the many areas that you see significant protests. That is in Samsung. It's almost close to the border with China. So, and that area was known for many mainland day they tripled. So they took up a lot of grocery and become very crowded for Hong Kongers. So every district, every community have their own complaint with the integration with the mainland China. So it's another way to encourage more people to join the project. So this table, that the what I call this area, emerging area. So you see that starting in the summer, so more projects happening in the emerging area and convention centers. And also the other way to look at the spread and development of the project is look at innovation. So how new projects actually was coined, was invented, adopted. So as I said before, I have a table of 133 action. So this is the table I try to present the first appearance by month. So you see the appearance that starting in May, people were doing new things, even like June alone, you see like around 45 new action have been invented. And then the kind of invented continuing in the summer, but later in the December, in the later part of the year, you see the descending trend. That means that once the movement has lost its momentum, you can come up with new repertoire, new actions. People just do what they have been invented before. And from the authority itself, of course, if you have new action, that will become threat because they don't know how to respond to it. But it takes time for them to neutralize the new project. As I said before, airport project, I think it's a genuine invention for the protest. Because at that time, during in the summer, they already know that Hong Kong policemen will use tear gas in the open street, even in the mall, even in the MRT station. So, but they calculate that Hong Kong police will not use that in airport terminal because that's an international gateway. That would create so much embarrassment for international tourists. So they try to gather in the airport for many times. But Hong Kong government, of course, they don't sit idle. They invent a lot of ways, like for example, use court injunction, and then they step by step to restrict the access to the airport. For example, there was one moment that if you don't have a valid boarding pass, you cannot access the airport. So they try to intercept from the city. And people try to do that. Okay, I try to gather on a transportation hub to the airport. Then again, police do that to neutralize this place. So you see this back and forth. Eventually, the government got the upper hand to neutralize this offensive of the new protest. And also, I will try to show that toward the later period of the project, you see increasing marginalization of projects. So it takes a little bit time for explain this table. So I divide it into 71 weeks, and also I use a correlation, bilateral correlation of these three types of projects. So you look at all weeks, so you see like all positive correlation between like peaceful and disruptive projects, between peaceful and violent projects. This means that in the week that more peaceful projects happen, you also tend to see more disruptive projects. So you see that it's all mutually reinforcing, mutually supporting. But if you divide it into three periods, you see that a gradual decay of once very coherent projects. So in the first 1/3, you see that, of course, it's all positive. But beginning in the middle section, you see that there's a negative sign arrive between the peaceful and violent, which according to my interpretation, is that the violent one tend to crowd out the peaceful one. And toward the last period, you see even a disruptive one. There's a negative sign between the disruptive and the peaceful one, which according to me is like even the disruptive one became to discourage the peaceful one to take place. So you see that there's a gradual disintegration process. This is also aligned with my interview because some of the militants are brave. They usually use some like tactic, like pick up the street tile and hurl a tile against the police to disrupt their deployment and so on. So these people need to be sheltered by the presence of peaceful participants. So the police find it difficult when you mix these people together. But once that you have this separation, that the the militant one were doing the disruptive and violent one, when the people don't like to join them, then it's easier for police to target those violent ones. So also, aside from street protest, I think the protest also happen in people's identity. And I want to highlight the fact that this is an unusual moment that Hong Kongers were called to show the solidarity. So I look at one here is I look at the statement. Because from the very beginning, when the extradition bill amendment was unveiled, there were a lot of organizations, a lot of group forming that is showing the sign on the collective statement, but usually by alumnus organization. So they try to show that we are the graduate of this school, and our school model is like this, and it told us to be like this. And with that, we oppose the government effort to change the fugitive regulation. But as protests went on, you see more emerging organizations that they take a stand, they use the group name to justify the movement. But altogether, I have nearly 900 statements, and altogether, you show that actually there's a expressive act to show Hong Kong was a diverse and inclusive community. So signature collection was originally organizing, a way of organizing. And then in the middle part, you see professional argument emerging. That, for example, political psychologists argue that for the benefit of mental health, it expects the government to tolerate this community then on board, because that's good for expression. And you have an outlet for people's set up sentiment, so people become healthier. Also, unexpected group also emerged in the process, like ACG fans, ACG means anime, comic, and game, which of course many of the products based on Japan. So they were arguing that because mainland authority has not been very tolerant about ACG. They know, these fans know what happened in the mainland, because the secondary creation was being banned and being censored. So they were arguing that for if a tradition was allowed in Hong Kong, so they might suffer the same fate with the mainland counterpart. So they signed a good statement for that, and so on. And so I think it's quite interesting, because the more and more group were formed for that. So you really see a trend from existing group organization to act, to make new group, to make new identity. So housewife, neighborhood, police family, middle class, new migrants, even sexual minority also produce their own statement. So as you can say, this is quite a moment when a new community was formed. And many people, many different identities want to be part of that. They try to claim their legitimate place in that newly emerging community. So I think it's a performative, right? Like the statement is more than a statement. It's claim on our own legitimate place in this Hong Kong community. And also, I want to also look at what happened beyond Hong Kong. We know Hong Kong is a super globalized international city, and there have been many events that you know that the protest, the audience was actually distant. It's not the Hong Kong government. So there are a lot of protests, like a lot of protests were making on a foreign consulate. They try to get international involvement, because the extradition bill applied not only to Hong Kong residents, but also to expat community, but also to international passenger who just had a layover in Hong Kong airport. So it's very encompassing. And also they are globally coordinated rally. So like within 24 hours or 48 hours, you will have a rally of protests across the globe. And also I want to mention that it's quite interesting, because with the emergency brewing in the hometown, so many diaspora groups become concerned. So it's really the process of how protests in the community, not the other way around, that you have community in the first, then people like to act together, because the sheer sense of urgency, that the power of identity really is powerful, making new community. So this is based a Paris example was that How many minutes do I have?
Oh, 10.
Okay, I'll wrap it up in 10. Okay, so just bear with me. So this is a example from Paris that we know France is not usually considered a destination for Hong Kong outward migrants, but there was a protest in the city of Paris, and people just gather around the nearby cafe. They form a new organization out of that. And this is also from a Zurich photographer who is now Hong Konger, who just organized a photo exhibition to highlight the police brutality, violence, and that photography exhibition attracted a lot of Hong Kong migrants there. So this, according to him, that they were conversing in Cantonese, probably the first time they did ever in Switzerland. So you see that happening in different parts of the world. And also, I will have to highlight the fact that Hong Kong's diaspora action, which is also current the research that I continue beyond this book, I think happened in a very difficult and confused time. Number one is that we all know PRC's overseas reach, transnational capacity for transnational repression is increasing. So that there's a quick comparison that back in 2014 of the during umbrella movement, you see social media, even the national media were rather accepted for Hong Kong protests. But when it comes to 2019, you see a lot of negative report on Hong Kong, branding as a violent one, or you see a lot of PRC citizens counter mobilization against Hong Kong protests. Also happened here in Australia. So little pain, so that was a phenomenon that was largely absent in 2014. And you see that in many Western democracies, you see growing polarization. As if that Hong Kong protests really often end up with aligned with the wrong friends and antagonized with the wrong friends and so on. So like, for example, this is from a US interviewee said that because Hong Kong will complain about police violence. So right-wing gun owner approach Hong Kong and said that maybe you should have a Second Amendment, so that will solve the problem at all. And some Hong Kongers believe by that. Also, in the Europe, many tanky leftist professors who think that everything happening in Hong Kong was just creation of CIA. That was actually the exact narrative that China was trying to sell. And this is from Warsaw. I should show a picture. I don't have time to picture. So there was a rally in Poland. Warsaw, of course, Poland was not a major player when it comes to Hong Kong, but there were people involved together there. So this is according to the interview, that it's like capitalists and community join together. Socialists support Hong Kong for democracy, but libertarian, right-wing libertarian, who think that the free market is the most important virtue, and who cherish Hong Kong for being a free market paradigm. Hong Kong used to claim that the credit, okay, and so libertarian for freedom. So you see the coming together of people with different reasons, and so that was really a confusing time for Hong Kong's pro-democracy diaspora. And also in the book, I try to argue that the protest, of course, ended. The street protest, the street was common, but the movement continued in many ways, in the way of what I call post-mobilizational activities. So in sociology, we have different way of describing what happened. Later on, a band structure, I mean that holding together people withdrawn to a tightly knit personal connection, refraining from public engagement. Or like everyday researcher, James Scott idea have been very seminal, applying to a lot of places. But I will have to argue that there was still proactive action there, and these actions, some of them are restorative. Because many people were facing persecution. Many people had to went to jail, and not only this prisoner, but also their family need support. So you see a lot of action, alternative media, community newspaper, independent bookstore, and call and prison support action still unfolding, both in Hong Kong and abroad. So I come to my conclusion. So what we witnessed in Hong Kong was what I call collectively improvised action, spanning across the boundary between online, offline, personal, organizational, and home and abroad divide. So it's a major campaign. I'm coming from a sociological background, so I cannot help think of one of our founder, Emile Durkheim. The idea actually he got from reading the research from on Australian Aboriginal people, that when people gather together, there was a creative energy. That was really the source of all arts, literature, and means. And this is an exceptional emotional status of what you call collective effervescence. I think many Hong Kongers experience that. That's why we can understand how new action, new slogan, new jargon, and new idea was invented in a very intense period of time. And there are, of course, a lot of ways try to describe a movement, like it's 兄弟三个是努力的 brother kind among each have contributed its effort. This was a widely quoted slogan during the protest, meaning that everyone are free to do whatever they want. Okay. But this is very formalistic, sometimes very enigmatic, sometimes very ambiguous. So what I do as a social scientist is try to translate into sociological language. And I use that with the help of actionist sociology. So it's not really about opportunity or resource. It's more about agents' power. So what I call collective improvisation. And I will see that we see the same dynamic at play in other global projects as well. And the final question was, where is Hong Kong going? Do we know that there's a police state at home, and the diaspora organization have been doing many protest groups against Communist China? They could be Uyghur, Tibetan, Taiwanese, Falun Gong. And also we know it's been like 5 years from now. So the Hong Kong has been fading out of international news attention. Even Jimmy and I have been given 20 years just a week ago. I think that does not create as much as news attention as I would like. So which is of course a significant act that symbolizes the Beijing's act to stamp out Hong Kong voting rights. So there are some comparison possible routes. I think one of them would be Tiananmen overseas Chinese voting rights. So initially they had all the world's sympathy with the Tiananmen tragedy, but they are facing an upward battle because PRC become more and more prosperous. Many Western countries want to do business, so they try to sideline the human rights concern. Also, they were infighting there. So I think probably everyone agree that overseas Chinese voting overseas is not an important player right now. Some people argue that they were less important than foreign. And the other possible scenarios, Taiwan overseas co-independent, which happened in 48, then spent another around more than 40 years without being able to come home to Taiwan. And when in the early 90s, the blacklist was already lifted, many people just died overseas and have a second generation come carry on the torch. So this is another route. But for me, it's very difficult to foresee the future of Hong Kong. I think because coming from actionist perspective, I think we can argue from structure, opportunity, from structure, resources, try to argue that the future of Hong Kong, how does it play out in the US-China rivalry and so on. But I think one of the undetermined factors is Hong Kong needs. So my understanding is that Hong Kong, whether they are overseas or at home, if they determine to become democratic, I think that there might be one day that Hong Kong might be democratic again. But if they give up the hope, I think that will never come true. So the lesson of my book was that the final chapter of Hong Kong growing overseas is remain unwritten. So thank you so much for your attention. I end here.
Thanks so much.